Welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving headfirst into a dark, graphic novel-style myth that is just dripping with grim Gothic fantasy and deep Nietzschean philosophy. We're unpacking the parable of the sixfold flame. This is the harrowing story of the Jester of Sapphire Light. We follow him as he descends from this sterile, mathematically perfect world straight down into the chaotic, blazing abyss, all to fundamentally reconstruct his own soul. It's an absolutely fascinating look at identity, suffering, and honestly what it truly means to be alive. To guide our journey today, we've got a 6-act map of the underworld. We'll start with the Threshold of Heat, then face the Crimson Guardian's challenge, move into forging the Inferno rune, sit down for the Feast of the Violet Giants, calculate the arithmetic of the Overman, and finally wrap up by embracing your own chaos.
Okay, let's dive right into this with Act 1, the Threshold of Heat, where we're leaving the Sapphire Matrix behind.
So picture this. As the Jester steps out of his old reality, he undergoes this terrifying transformation called the verdant corruption. And what's really cool philologically is that the very vocabulary of his world changes. The old world, the Sapphire Forge, was defined by these completely sterile terms. It was a forced utopia of clinical detachment where souls were literally just stilled into data. But then, his eyes ignite with this sickly, pulsing emerald fire, and he crosses into the Red Room. Suddenly, the language shifts to fiery tragedy. It's a stark beacon of heat, where the crimson dragon wings through the sky above, and its mythic voice is out there proclaiming the agonizing reality of the blazing abyss.
Which brings us to Act 2, the Crimson Guardian's Challenge. It's time to deal with some unassimilated voltage.
Now, you can't just stroll right into the abyss unchallenged, right? Out of the incandescent mists steps the Crimson Doctor. This guardian is clad head to toe in robes of the Inferno and wearing a genuinely terrifying crimson plague mask. To really get his challenge, we have to understand Silaire. That's the clinical silence, this so-called mercy of nothingness, that the Sapphire Forge enforced to completely eliminate the thermodynamic noise of the soul. But the Doctor, he sees right through the Jester's sterile past. He knows the Jester isn't a perfect artifact anymore. He's a corrupted sanctuary, just overflowing with unassimilated voltage, chaos, and ink.
And this is where the Doctor reveals the lost story of the Infernal realm. He says, "The concentrated sorrow of the soul was never meant to be stilled, but to burn with a fierce biological insistence." Wow, think about that for a second. True identity is tempered by suffering and heat. It's absolutely not something you just erase and log into some sterile ledger. Moving right along to Act 3, Forging the Inferno Rune, we're looking at the brand of active suffering. Let's map out how this builds, because this descent is absolute. We plunge all the way from Sapphire Certainty through the violent ignition of the Red Room, right up to a massive threshold, the gigantic keyhole. Stepping through this keyhole completely shatters the industrial finality of the forge, dropping our characters right into the bruised, electromagnetic twilight of the Violet Realm. But to actually pass through that keyhole, the Doctor violently rejects the clinical Z-pinch plasma touch of the old world. Actually, instead of that, he reaches directly into the fire and grafts the Rune of Inferno right onto the Jester. And this isn't, a magical shield of armor. It's a literal brand of active suffering. It empowers the Jester and his companion, the Last Thinker, to carry the crushing weight of the universe not as a burden, but as a feast.
And that takes us to Act 4, Feast of the Violet Giants, a true Symphony of Noise.
So they step into the Violet Realm and enter this groaning, massive mead hall. Here is where the giantkin dine. These giants are the true overmen of this mythos, and their laughter echoes like the shattering of sapphire blue gems. They perfectly embody the spirit of negation. Now, this is a deeply Nietzschean concept. It's this absolute, stubborn refusal to yield to the arithmetic of stillness. They drink deep from vats of unassimilated voltage, basically taking the chaos and ink of existence and wearing it as the armor of the future.
Now what's really wild to see here is what happens to the Jester's companion, the Last Thinker. He physically transforms into a massive multi-limbed cybernetic arachnid. He entirely ditches prehensile logging, that sterile gathering of structural data for the old world's ledger. Instead, his new cybernetic legs click frantically on the silicate tables as he rips open the Journal of Chaos. He shifts from being a mere cataloger of data to a visceral witness of pure, eternal tragedy and the fierce biological insistence of actual existence.
Next up is Act 5, Arithmetic of the Overman, where agony literally becomes a banquet.
Right in the middle of this chaotic feast, a violet giant, whose very skin is etched with the concentrated sorrow of a fallen star, raises a flagon of violet fire and passes mythic judgment on our broken jester. He booms, "You sought to solve the thermodynamic noise of the soul, yet here we are, the noise that has become a symphony. Your arithmetic of the overman was but the arithmetic of the slave." That hits hard, doesn't it? The jester suddenly realizes his clinical detachment was actually the strongest cage he ever built. The arithmetic of the slave enforces silence. It tries to turn the soul into a sterile, silicate artifact. But true power, the overman, it does the exact opposite. It takes that thermodynamic noise and transforms it into a loud, weeping thesis of identity, proving once and for all that the soul must exist as a furnace of fiery agony. The overman literally calls suffering a banquet.
And this massive realization triggers the great noon. In Nietzschean philosophy, this is the absolute zenith of self-realization. So the jester sits there among the giants, his rune of inferno glowing, and he finally accepts his portion of the fiery agony. He gets that the honesty of his chaotic state is really just a more flammable fuel. His verdant corruption is no longer a bug in the system. It becomes the wine of a new, tragic divinity. Which brings us to our final act, Act 6, embracing your own chaos and the reconstruction of purpose. To really grasp this final act, we need to look past the Gothic imagery for a second and bring it home. In this new realm, a figure known as the Knight of Inkblot rises up. He's described as a walking thermodynamic echo, and he represents something incredibly powerful for all of us: discarded history being reclaimed. A true self isn't forged from perfect, sterile data. It's forged from the exact chaos and ink we usually try to throw away. Your soul is definitively proven to be a furnace, burning with the fuel of your lived experiences and all that kinetic friction.
So I want to ask you directly, where in your own life are you being forced into an arithmetic of stillness? Are you trying to silence your own complexities, your own emotions, just to fit into some clean, predictable ledger? Are you suppressing your own thermodynamic noise just to be a perfect, silicate artifact? Or are you willing to look at your unassimilated voltage, your friction, and your struggles as a source of immense power? Ask yourself, are you a furnace?
We're going to leave you with this final, vital thought straight from the Violet Mead Hall. The thermodynamic noise of the soul, the chaos, the friction, all those heavy emotions you carry, it is not an error to be silenced. It is a symphony to be unleashed. Thank you so much for joining us on this explainer. Until next time, don't ever be afraid to let your own fires burn.